Well, that was all just a bunch of Hokum. Or was it? Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are reviewing Hokum, written and directed by Damian McCarthy, starring Adam Scott, Peter Coonan, David Wilmot, Michael Patric, Will O'Connell, and Florence Ordesh. This movie follows a writer visiting the hotel in Ireland that his now deceased parents once went to on their honeymoon, only to find some mysterious and horrifying things going on in the honeymoon suites. And I'll of course be getting to spoilers for Hokum, so if you haven't had a chance to watch it just yet, definitely go check it out, as this is the first great horror film that we will see over the next month.
I can't find a way out. I keep hearing something. I think there's someone down here.
The first thing that I have to talk about when it comes to this film is the scares. Damian McCarthy, between Oddity and now Hokum, has proven that he is a master at staging jump scares. McCarthy is great at building out suspenseful sequences following our odd cast of characters, exploring the mysterious corners of this hotel, even down to the quick flashbacks that we get in the first act as workers in the hotel explain their encounters with the witch that haunts this hotel, or at least that's what the local town folklore suggests. But what I love about these scares in this film in particular are the brief moments of humor you get after some of these scares. Jerry's story of seeing Fiona's ghost ringing the honeymoon suite service bell comes to mind, as the jump scare of seeing her was great, but it is immediately followed by seeing Jerry's impression of her as he tells a story to Ohm. Really funny stuff. And I honestly usually do get a good chuckle out of a jump scare, whatever it does get me, and so this movie really does understand why it can be so fun to watch horror films like this. But the film doesn't just have fun jump scares, it also has a solid story to keep you interested in between all the jumps. Adam Scott plays BAUMAN, a very troubled and depressed horror writer with enough trauma to warrant a horror movie about his own life. He visits this hotel in order to peacefully spread the ashes of his parents in the surrounding woods, well, at least his mother's ashes, before planning on taking his own life. He tells the bartender Fiona the story of his parents' death that involves his mother being murdered by someone who was too young to be thrown in jail, who he says should have been hanged for what he did, and how in the ensuing years his father drank himself to death. You do discover throughout the movie that, I do think it was a little bit obvious in this first story, that Ohm was the one who was responsible for his parents' death, and the ghost you see haunting him even before this retreat to Ireland is that of his mother's, a representation essentially of his guilt that he carries around with him. And I love how as the movie progresses, his outlook on life changes. He starts out the film extremely depressed, ridden with guilt, with his writing reflecting the bleak endings he thinks that he deserves. But through Fiona's kindness, her advice, her saving his life when she finds him hanging inside of his room, and his want to repay her by searching for her once she goes missing, he eventually finds it within himself to accept what he had done as a kid was just an accident, and to give himself the grace to write a happier and more hopeful ending to his book by the end of this story. And as a side note, I actually really did dig how this movie had bookends with the two different endings of the book that he was writing, starting with the story of the Conquistador using the boy's head to try to break the bottle with the treasure map in it, only for it to not work and for him to wander off and die in the desert, contrasted with the hopeful ending as he instead tells the boy to break the bottle against his own head, offering to sacrifice himself so the boy can find the treasure. It of course ends with him throwing the bottle aside to embrace his father figure, with the bottle landing beside the skull of, I believe, a goat, giving them something to break the bottle with that they wouldn't have found otherwise. Really poetic stuff in like a D plot that really doesn't matter, but it does bookend the story in a really satisfying way that essentially proves the character arc that Ohm goes through throughout the story. Also, another side note, I just realized I didn't have my light on over there. Things are going great. But going back to the main plot, let's talk about what's actually going on at this hotel and whether or not it was all just a bunch of Hokum. Hokum, of course, meaning nonsense, as the story of this movie can be seen as a bad trip on magic mushrooms or a twisted story of guilt, murder, and witchcraft. Well, I think either way, this movie is still a story about guilt and murder for sure, but whether or not there was a witch is the question. And also, what the fuck was up with the rabbit man? A lot of questions here. So after Ohm is discharged from the hospital, he finds out that the bartender Fiona went missing shortly after she saved his life. Mal, one of the hotel clerks, suggests that some man in the woods might be responsible for her disappearance, and that is of course the eccentric milk mushroom man named Jerry, who Ohm had encountered when he was spreading the ashes of his parents. When confronting Jerry, he then tells the story of Fiona's ghost, hinting at something being up in that honeymoon suite, and we then get to see all the fun stuff with Ohm and Jerry breaking into this honeymoon suite that we've been teased with being haunted by some witch for the first act of this film. And I love loved everything that happened once Ohm finds himself up in that suite. There's some really fun jump scares with the ghost of his mom, the dreaded rabbit man, who is a part of some old childhood show he watched that now taunts him over the guilt he feels, along with everything surrounding the dumbwaiter, which was a ton of fun. Fiona's body was of course inside of that dumbwaiter with Ohm's recorder that tells the story of what truly happened to her. It was of course Mal who drugged her on Halloween night, ditching her body in the dumbwaiter that led to the basement, essentially leaving her as a sacrifice to whatever presides down below. The reasoning being that they had an affair, and when Mal discovered that she was pregnant and willing to keep the baby, that is when he decided to ditch her body inside of that suite. Mal of course also locks Ohm up inside of that suite, hoping that the same thing would happen to him, leaving Ohm to try to find different ways to escape. He does of course go down into the basement using the clock with a swinging hammer to trigger the dumbwaiter to go up and down, and I absolutely loved this conceit as it added a lot of tension to Ohm getting back to the dumbwaiter in time, along with some great humor as it also does almost send him back down to the witch after he thinks he escapes. I loved the witch crawling up the dumbwaiter shaft, a very hereditary thing of her to do, and it was of course fun to see the lore of using a circle of chalk to stop a witch from getting to you. If it works for sea bears, of course it also works for witches. Great to know.
Quick! Jump inside our anti-sea bear circle before he comes back!
Yeah, sea bears often attack more than once.
Are you crazy?
But the true MVP of this film is Jerry, played by David Wilmot, who just can't help but to steal every scene that he was in. I dug his backstory as a man who everybody thinks killed his own wife, to find out that's, well, yeah, he did. But in a wholesome way, of course, as she was sick and in pain, and he did it to end her suffering. It's a positive thing, I swear. But he was also just a really good friend throughout this movie, risking his life to find Fiona and following her intuition and knowing something was truly wrong with Mal and how he was acting when he returned to the hotel to find Ohm. The frustration in Ohm ringing the service bell every single time Jerry walked out of the hotel was great, and so satisfying when he does finally go back in one last time just to hear the bell ring. The tragedy in his death at the hands of Mal cannot be understated. It was so sad, but it only further sells Mal's desperation in hiding his guilt and murder. Ohm flees down the dumbwaiter with the keys to escape the hotel, leading to probably my favorite scare inside of the film as the witch interrupts his attempt at drawing the anti-sea bear circle. Mal, of course, follows and is caught by the witch immediately, who is then dragged into some room with a bunch of hungry spirits. Ohm accepts his trauma as an accident, breaks free using the same blade Fiona used to save him earlier on in the film, and he escapes through the burning hotel. We even get an epilogue of sorts as we get to see the Belle/Ice Cream Boy visiting Ohm inside of the hospital, once again asking him to read his dreaded manuscript, completed his character arc in being a better and less bleak person. Very poetic. But why is the movie called Hokum? Why is there some suggestion that something nonsensical is going on? Well, apparently the bellboy spiked Ohm's whiskey with Jerry's magic mushroom powder after Ohm rejected his manuscript and burned his hand, which, fair. But does that mean that the mushrooms cause all these hallucinations to happen, or did these things truly happen? Or was it the mushrooms that made it so Ohm could see these things going after him, like his mother's ghost, the rabbit man, and the witch, making it possible for him to survive the nonsensical reality he was living in? I love a great open ending that will leave us wondering what truly happened. So I overall really enjoyed the ride this movie took me on, despite its execution being fairly simple. If I were to have any real criticisms, I definitely was hoping for a bit more with the witch by the film's ending. It does wrap up fairly quickly, and the supernatural stuff fully took a back seat in favor of focusing on Mal as the Jack Torrance-esque villain of this film. But if you truly see the supernatural stuff as hallucinations that truly didn't happen, maybe that works better for you. But I like to still think that it did happen in the way that we see, because that is just more fun. But those are just going to be my thoughts on Hokum. Was the witch a real threat, or was he a threat to the Mals we met along the way? Hokum or not, let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, if you did enjoy this review, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this. And as I mentioned, the next month will be filled with a ton of great horror films, from Obsession to Passenger to the highly anticipated Backrooms movie, so definitely stay tuned to the channel for my thoughts on all of those films. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.